Every human being lives by a story. Whether you realize it or not, there is a script running in the background of your mind that you've been following for years. It's the narrative that tells you who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, and what your limits are. It's the voice that says, "I've always been this way," or "People like me never get ahead," or "I'm not good enough," or even, "I have to be perfect to be loved." That story isn't just some random string of thoughts. It's your identity. It's the emotional glue that holds your beliefs together, the lens you see the world through, and the silent force guiding every choice you make. Most people think identity is fixed, like it's something you're born into, stuck with, or passed down from someone else. But identity is fluid. It's not who you are, it's who you think you are. And what you think about yourself is just the story you've told yourself the most. The moment you realize that, you unlock something that most people never will. You don't have to keep living the same story. Here's the truth: we don't act according to who we are. We act according to who we believe we are. If your story is, "I'm always anxious," you'll find ways to reinforce that story. You'll hesitate, you'll avoid, and you'll retreat. And every time you do, the story gains strength. You'll say, "See, that's just how I am." But what if the story changed? What if you started saying, "I've had anxiety in the past, but I'm learning how to find peace"? The moment the story shifts, so does the behavior. And the moment the behavior shifts, the identity begins to evolve. We become addicted to our stories, even the ones that hurt us. Why? Because they're familiar. Because they make sense of our pain. Because they justify our inaction. Your story might not serve you, but it protects you from change, and change is uncomfortable. But if you're living in a story that keeps you small, that keeps you repeating patterns, that keeps you playing not to lose instead of playing to win, then you're living in a prison of your own making. And the door is wide open. The most dangerous stories are the ones that sound like truth. I've always struggled with money. No one in my family ever succeeded. I've been through too much. I'm not wired like those people who win. These aren't facts. They're conclusions drawn from past experiences. And every time you repeat them, you breathe life into them. But past experience isn't destiny, it's just a reference point, a data point. And if you don't challenge it, it becomes your identity. Identity drives behavior. If you see yourself as a leader, you'll find the strength to lead. If you see yourself as broken, you'll unconsciously sabotage every chance you get to heal. Your story is the thermostat of your life. It sets the temperature. Even if something amazing happens, if it doesn't fit your story, you'll find a way to cool things down again. You'll push people away. You'll make mistakes that reinforce the story. You'll go back to what's familiar, not what's possible. People think they need more strategies, more tools, more resources. But strategies without a shift in identity are useless. If you hand $1 million opportunity to someone whose story is, "I'm not good with money," they'll lose it in 6 months. Not because they're incapable, but because their story won't let them keep it. The story will whisper, "This isn't who you are." And the mind hates dissonance. It will always find a way back to alignment, even if it means destroying your progress. What's wild is that most of us didn't even choose our stories. They were given to us, handed down by parents who were scared, reinforced by teachers who didn't believe in us, strengthened by failures we never forgave ourselves for. And over time, we stopped questioning them. We started calling them truth. But there's a moment, and that moment is now, where you get to stop and say, "Wait a minute. Is this my story? Or is this someone else's fear dressed up as my identity?" You don't need to become someone new. You just need to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Peel back the layers. Get honest about the lies you've been telling yourself, the excuses you've dressed up as facts, the victimhood you've disguised as realism. Because as long as the old story is running, the new life can't begin. Every time you affirm that old story, you dig the groove deeper in your nervous system. But every time you challenge it, even just a little, you start to weaken its grip. You create cracks in the foundation. You create space for something new to grow. And maybe for the first time you start asking, what if I'm not who I've always said I am? What if I'm more? And that question alone has the power to shatter everything you thought you knew. Because once you see that you are the author, not just the actor, you stop settling for the role you've been handed. You start rewriting scenes. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you, and you start being the force that changes everything. You stop saying, "That's just the way it is." And you start declaring, "This is how it's going to be." And that shift, right there, is where transformation begins. When your story changes, people walk through life like they're dragging a 100-pound anchor behind them. And that anchor is their past. They carry it into every relationship, every opportunity, every decision. And then they wonder why they can't move forward, why they feel stuck, why the same problems keep showing up with different faces. The reason is simple: they're not just remembering the past, they're living in it. They've built a home in it, decorated the walls with old pain, hung up frames of failure, moved the furniture around just enough to make it feel like it's changed, but they've never really left. The past is real, but it's over. It happened. And your brain, especially when it's operating in survival mode, wants to relive it, replay it, analyze it, obsess over it. Why? Because the brain's job is not to make you happy, it's to keep you alive, and the past is familiar. Even if it hurt, even if it broke you, even if it nearly killed you, it's predictable. And the brain clings to what it knows. But what it knows isn't necessarily what you need. And familiarity doesn't equal truth. It just means it's been repeated enough times that you've accepted it as reality. Here's the shift: the past is a place you can learn from, but not a place you should live in. It's a reference point, not a residence. If you're still telling the story of what happened 10 years ago with the same emotion, with the same pain, with the same sense of injustice, then you're not remembering it, you're reliving it. You've made your mind a time machine that only goes backwards. And that story, that emotional signature, it's not just psychological, it's physiological. Your body memorizes the emotions. It becomes your default setting. So even if your circumstances change, you'll keep attracting the same energy, the same experiences, because you haven't changed the pattern. You are not your history. You are not what happened to you. You are not the worst decision you ever made. You are not the pain that someone else caused you. But if you keep using the past as proof of who you are, you'll never become who you were meant to be. It doesn't matter what your parents said. It doesn't matter who left, who lied, who didn't show up. It doesn't matter what you failed at, what you missed, what you lost. What matters is what you decide now. Because every day you wake up, you're presented with a question: do I want to live based on memory, or do I want to live based on vision? Most people are unconsciously committed to their past. They're loyal to it. They defend it. They use it to justify their limitations. They'll say, "Well, you don't know what I've been through." And they're right. You don't. But that doesn't change the fact that using the past as an excuse to stay stuck is a form of self-sabotage. It's self-imprisonment with the illusion of safety. It's like hugging your chains and calling them protection. You cannot change your life while defending your pain. You can either have a story or a breakthrough, but not both. The past can give you perspective. It can give you fuel. It can be a source of wisdom. But only if you use it as a teacher, not a master. If you keep bowing to it, if you keep saying, "This is who I am because of what happened," then you've allowed an old version of you to run the show. And that version wasn't built to handle your future. That version was created in survival. But you're not here to survive. You're here to lead. You're here to grow. You're here to expand. And expansion only happens when you stop letting the rearview mirror guide the direction of your life. Some people romanticize their pain. They wear it like a badge. They build an identity around being the one who suffered, the one who struggled, the one who was always overlooked. And that identity becomes more important than freedom. Because freedom requires responsibility. It means you don't get to blame anymore. It means you don't get to coast on victimhood. It means you have to own your present moment fully. And most people aren't ready for that, because it's easier to say, "I can't," than to admit, "I haven't tried in a new way." When you let the past dictate your present, you rob yourself of possibility. You kill creativity. You shut down vision. You filter every opportunity through the lens of fear, failure, and limitation. You don't take the risk because it didn't work last time. You don't open your heart because it was broken once. You don't speak up because your voice wasn't heard before. But the you that you are now is not the you that went through that. You've grown. You've learned. You've survived. And if you're still here, breathing, reading this, then there's a part of you that's ready. That's hungry. That knows it's time. It's time to move out of the emotional house you built in your past. Tear down the walls. Pack up the stories. Burn the lease. You don't owe it anything. You don't have to keep paying rent on a pain that already taught you what it needed to teach you. You're allowed to move on. You're allowed to choose again. You're allowed to create a new life. Not because the past didn't happen, but because you're no longer letting it define what happens next. The past may explain you, but it does not excuse you. It does not excuse you from being powerful. It does not excuse you from becoming the example instead of the excuse. It does not excuse you from rising, from choosing again, from deciding that what was does not determine what is. It does not excuse you from the responsibility of owning your future. Because the moment you stop letting the past live through you is the moment you start living for real. Belief is not truth. Belief is not fact. Belief is repetition. You believe what you keep saying, what you keep feeling, what you keep feeding. And the most dangerous beliefs are the ones you've repeated so many times, you no longer question them. You think they're part of your DNA. But they're not. They're just stories. Stories soaked in emotion, reinforced through action, sealed by memory, and repeated until they became your reality. And once you believe something, you no longer see the world as it is. You see it as you are. If someone told you every day as a child, "You're not enough," eventually you stop resisting it, you start repeating it. First internally, then externally, you shrink back from opportunities, you self-sabotage, you underperform, and you say, "See, that's just who I am." But it's not who you are. It's who you've decided to be based on a belief that never belonged to you in the first place. And the worst part is, you think it's reality. But belief creates the filter, and the filter becomes the prison. The mind doesn't care if a belief is true, it only cares if it's familiar. Because familiar means safe. Familiar means predictable. Familiar means your nervous system knows how to survive in it. So the belief, "I'm not lovable," might tear your soul apart, but at least you know how to live in that pain, and so you stay there. You stay in that story, and every time life hands you something good, you find a way to sabotage it just enough to prove the belief was right all along. That's the cycle. A belief creates a pattern, the pattern creates results, and the results reinforce the belief. It's a loop, and the only way out of the loop is to interrupt the pattern at the root. The story you're telling yourself. But most people try to fix the behavior, not the belief. They try to change the results without changing the cause. That's like painting over mold without dealing with the leak. It might look better for a while, but the rot is still there. Because the root isn't what you're doing, it's what you're believing. You can't outperform your beliefs. You can grind, you can hustle, you can work day and night, but if deep down you believe you're unworthy, undeserving, or incapable, you will find a way to make sure that belief wins. The belief always wins. Not because it's true, but because you give it authority. You give it power. You feed it with every word you speak, every thought you entertain, every decision you avoid. You think you're playing it safe, but you're actually keeping yourself small. And the belief is running your life while you think you're the one in control. You want to know what shapes belief faster than anything else? Emotion. The more emotion you attach to a story, the faster it becomes a belief. That's why a single moment, one heartbreak, one rejection, one failure, can change someone's identity forever. They go from confident to guarded, from expressive to shut down. Not because it had to be that way, but because in that moment they attached pain to a new story, and they kept playing it on repeat. I guess I can't trust anyone. I guess I'm not cut out for this. I guess it's not meant for me. And that guess becomes a decision. And that decision becomes a destiny. The story turns into a belief. The belief turns into a pattern. The pattern turns into a life. And here's the truth no one wants to hear: you are not your beliefs. You are the thinker of the thoughts, the storyteller behind the narrative. But most people forget that. They think their beliefs are permanent, carved in stone, hardwired. But belief is malleable. You can shift it. You can rewrite it. You can decide that the story that got you here does not have to take you any further. You can change what you say to yourself. You can change the tone, the script, the rhythm, the energy. You can decide, right now, that the old belief was nothing more than a tired story spoken by a scared version of you. Your life is a reflection of the beliefs you've chosen to entertain. If you believe the world is out to get you, you'll see every challenge as an attack. If you believe success is for other people, you'll never take the risks required to earn it. If you believe love always ends in pain, you'll keep pushing it away before it can disappoint you. That's not intuition. That's programming. That's your brain trying to protect you from a pain you've already experienced. But protection isn't progress. Avoidance isn't freedom. You don't grow by defending old wounds. You grow by rewriting the rules. Some people spend their whole life reinforcing one belief: that life is hard, that people can't be trusted, that dreams are unrealistic. And then they use those beliefs to build lives of quiet desperation. But belief is a choice. You can choose to believe that life is happening for you, not to you. You can choose to believe that failure is a teacher, not a verdict. You can choose to believe that who you are doesn't determine who you'll become. But you have to repeat it, you have to feel it. You have to program it the same way the old belief was programmed, through intensity, through consistency, through emotion. You don't break limiting beliefs by casually wishing them away. You break them by confronting them, by exposing them, by asking, where did this come from? Who gave this to me? What's the benefit of holding on to it? What's the cost? You can't conquer what you're not willing to face. But the moment you face it, the moment you look that lie dead in the eye and say, not anymore, everything starts to shift. Not because the belief disappeared, but because you stopped feeding it the energy it needed to survive. You can't think your way out of a story you've been living in your body. You've tried. You've read the books. You've listened to the podcasts. You've said the affirmations in the mirror. But something still pulls you back. Something deeper. And that something is your physiology. The way you move. The way you breathe. The way you sit. The way you show up in your body every single day. Because your story isn't just in your mind. It's anchored in your nervous system. Locked into the way you physically experience your emotions. Emotion doesn't just appear. It's not random. It's triggered. And most of the time it's triggered by your motion. The way you stand, the way you hold your shoulders, the tension in your face, the rhythm of your breath. It's all connected. It's all communicating something constantly. You slouch, you breathe shallow, your eyes drop, your spine curls. You're not just tired, you're signaling defeat. You're reinforcing the identity of someone who doesn't feel in control. And you don't even realize you're doing it. That's the scary part. Most people are living out the emotion of their story on autopilot, and their body is the amplifier. You think you're anxious because of what's going on in your life, maybe. But look at how you're breathing. Look at the tension in your jaw. Look at the speed of your movements, the rigidity in your muscles. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. And patterns get memorized. And once the body memorizes a pattern, it doesn't wait for permission. It leads the emotion. The physiology comes first, the story comes second. You feel down, so your body collapses. But what if it's the other way around? What if you collapsed first and the emotion followed? You change the way you move, and you change the message your body sends to your brain. That's not a motivational slogan. That's biology. Your posture is not just posture, it's programming. Your breath is not just breath, it's information. You want to break a negative pattern, move. Not later. Now, shift your body. Interrupt the rhythm. Get loud. Get intense. Breathe deeper. Stand taller. Speak with certainty. Because when you change the way you move, you change the way you feel. And when you change the way you feel, you access parts of yourself that were dormant. Power that was already there, but it was buried under physical habits that were reinforcing weakness, hesitation, fear. Watch a confident person walk into a room. They don't even have to say a word, you can feel their presence. It's not magic, it's muscle memory. It's motion. It's years of living in a body that reflects certainty. And you can do the same, but you have to stop waiting to feel confident before you move like it. You move like it first. Emotion is not the starting point. Motion is. You don't wait until you feel like a leader to lead. You stand like one. You speak like one. You breathe like one. And your nervous system begins to respond in kind. The problem is that most people are addicted to their current emotional state. Not because they like it, but because it's familiar. If you've lived most of your life in stress, guess what feels normal? Stress. If you've been anxious for 10 years, guess what happens the moment things slow down? Your body freaks out and says, wait a second, this isn't safe. So it finds a way to create the emotion it's used to. That's why people sabotage peace. They're uncomfortable in stillness, because their motion and their emotion have been wired to operate in chaos. This isn't about pretending. It's not about fake positivity. It's about conditioning, training your body to break the physical habits that are keeping your emotional state stuck. Your body is your tool, your weapon, your gateway to transformation. But only if you use it intentionally. Most people use it reactively. They let life dictate how they feel. And then they wonder why they're so easily thrown off. Why the story of, I'm overwhelmed, keeps showing up. Why the story of, I'm not ready, keeps looping. It's because every time that emotion surfaces, they surrender to the same physiology that created it. You think mindset is about thoughts. That's part of it. But it's also about state. And state is physical. You can't access a peak state with weak posture, weak breath, weak movement. Try feeling unstoppable while staring at the floor with your shoulders slumped. Try feeling joy while you're clenching your jaw and breathing like you're under attack. It doesn't work. The body and mind are a system, not separate parts. Change one, and you change the other. The fastest way to shift your internal world is to shift your external behavior. That's why when you're in a funk, the last thing you want to do is move. But it's the first thing you must do. You get up. You shake it off. You go for a run. You blast music. You dance like a maniac in your living room. You scream. You jump. You disrupt the pattern. Because when you interrupt the motion, you interrupt the emotion. And suddenly, the story doesn't feel so permanent. Suddenly, the weight lifts a little. Suddenly, you have a choice again. The story you've been telling yourself might say you're not good enough, or too late, or too broken. But your body can challenge that story in real time. Your physiology can rewrite the script by showing you how it feels to be powerful, to be certain, to be alive. And when you feel it, not just think it, that's when it becomes real. That's when it integrates. That's when you stop reciting affirmations and start living them. Because belief without embodiment is fragile. But when your body joins the mission, when your breath matches your words, when your motion aligns with your message, that's when the old identity starts to crack. That's when the new one begins to form. Everything you do, everything you say, every choice you make, it all flows from one root, who you believe you are. Not who you tell the world you are, not who you want to be, but who, deep down, you believe yourself to be in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Identity isn't something you think about on the surface. It's something that drives everything from underneath. It's the invisible force behind your decisions, the thermostat of your life. And no matter how many goals you set, no matter how many strategies you try, you will never consistently act outside the identity you've accepted as your truth. You want to change your behavior. You want to stop procrastinating, stop playing small, stop breaking promises to yourself. Good. But if you don't shift your identity, none of it will last. Because behavior is the symptom, identity is the source. If you see yourself as someone who always quits, someone who never finishes, someone who can't be trusted, then your subconscious will go to work proving that story true. You'll get excited for a moment, start strong, maybe even get some results. But as soon as the emotion fades, the real driver kicks in, the identity. And the identity says, "This isn't who I am," and the sabotage begins. You don't rise to the level of your potential, you fall to the level of your identity. If you see yourself as average, your actions will reflect average, no matter how ambitious your dreams are. If you see yourself as unworthy, you'll reject every opportunity that looks like it might prove otherwise. If you see yourself as a victim, you'll unconsciously seek out villains to validate your pain. And this isn't conscious. That's what makes it so powerful. Identity works in the background, pulling the strings, directing the play, while you wonder why nothing ever seems to change for long. People say, "I want to be successful," but they carry the identity of someone who's afraid of being seen. They say, "I want deep connection," but they've wrapped themselves in the identity of someone who's always been abandoned. They say, "I want to be fit, strong, healthy," but their internal dialogue still says, "I've never been athletic, I always fall off, it's just who I am." That's not just a sentence, it's a script. And as long as that script is running, your behavior will follow its cues like a well-rehearsed actor. You act in alignment with who you believe you are. Not who you want to be, not who you pretend to be when the lights are on, but who you feel in your nervous system, in your gut, in your bones that you truly are. That's why when someone goes from broke to rich, but never updates their identity, they lose it all. They didn't shift who they are at the core, so their decisions defaulted back to scarcity. That's why someone can lose weight, look incredible, but gain it back the moment they stop feeling like the fat one who finally got it together. That identity was still there, quietly waiting for its moment to take the wheel again. You want a permanent shift? Then stop trying to change your behavior in isolation. Start asking bigger questions. Who do I need to become? What does that version of me believe? How do they carry themselves? What do they say yes to? And more importantly, what do they say no to? Identity change isn't just about adding new beliefs. It's about letting go of the ones that no longer serve the future you. You can't build a new life with the blueprint of who you used to be. The fastest way to shift identity is to behave in contradiction to the old one. Not once, repeatedly. You feel like a quitter. Finish something. You feel like a failure. Take one bold action and follow through, even if it scares you. You feel like you're not enough. Show up when it's uncomfortable. Speak up when your voice shakes, and stay consistent when no one's applauding. Every time you act against the old identity, You weaken its grip. You build evidence for a new self-image. And it's not overnight, it's not glamorous, but it's real. And it's the only way you ever make lasting change. The brain's job is to prove your identity, right? That's why change feels hard. Because when you start acting outside of who you've believed yourself to be, it feels like death to your ego. Your nervous system rebels. Your habits resist. Your inner critic gets loud. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're disrupting the pattern, and disruption is uncomfortable. It has to be. Growth lives there. Evolution lives there. The old version of you has to feel threatened for the new one to emerge. You can read every book, take every course, go to every seminar, and still be stuck if you don't upgrade the core story you're living from. That story is your identity. And until you claim a new one, your life will bend to match the old, even if it hurts, even if it limits you, because the familiar feels safer than the unknown. But identity isn't static, it's not set in stone. It's built, it's chosen, it's earned. You decide who you are by what you consistently do. And every decision, every habit, every action is either reinforcing the old or conditioning the new. When you finally say, "This is who I am now," and back it up with behavior, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, your world begins to reflect that shift. Not immediately, but inevitably. Because life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you believe you are worthy of. What you are congruent with. What you're willing to embody before the results show up. And the day you start honoring a new identity is the day you stop chasing change and start becoming it. You keep wondering why you're stuck. Why the same emotions come up. Why the same relationships crumble. Why the same financial ceiling stares you down like an enemy that knows you better than you know yourself. You change the people, you change the job, you move to a new city, but somehow the result doesn't change. Different scenery, same cycle. And the truth is, it's not your circumstances holding you back, it's your patterns. And until you recognize them, until you own them, you're not living with intention, you're living on loop. Pattern recognition is power. Because once you can see the pattern, you are no longer the pattern, you become the observer. And the moment you shift from participant to observer, you create space. Space to question, space to disrupt, space to choose. Most people never create that space. They feel the emotion, they react, they hit the trigger, they spiral. They mistake the pattern for their personality, and they wonder why transformation never sticks. But patterns aren't who you are. They're just repeated strategies. Habits of mind, body, and emotion that were built in response to a story, and then reinforced through repetition. Look back on your life. Think about the moments where you collapsed, where you self-sabotaged, where you lost momentum. Was it random, or did it follow a script? Every time you got close to success, something inside you pulled away. Every time you got close to love, something convinced you to shut down. Every time you got close to peace, chaos made a comeback. These aren't coincidences. These are patterns. And your nervous system is wired to repeat what feels familiar, not what feels empowering. If you want to change your story, you have to become a master of your own patterns. You have to track them, study them, watch for the emotional cues, the thoughts that loop, the excuses that sound noble but are really keeping you small. The moments you say, "I'm tired," when you're really afraid. The times you say, "I need clarity," when you're actually avoiding the discomfort of commitment. The way you pull back when things get good, because some part of you still believes you don't deserve it. These aren't just reactions. They're defense mechanisms, designed to protect the story, even if the story is destroying you. The mind loves patterns because patterns give certainty, and certainty equals safety. So even when the pattern is toxic, even when the pattern costs you joy, freedom, progress, it still gives your brain something it craves: predictability. And predictability feels like control. That's why people stay in miserable relationships, in jobs they hate, in identities they outgrew a decade ago. Because breaking the pattern means stepping into the unknown. And the unknown is where your future lives, but it's also where your fear hides. So the only way out is through. You have to become the disruptor of your own story. You have to catch the pattern mid-cycle, call it out, and do something radically different. The second you feel yourself withdrawing, you lean in. The second you hear that voice saying, "You can't," you get louder and say, "Watch me." You interrupt the autopilot reaction and replace it with a new move. Not a perfect one, just a new one. That's where transformation starts. Not in the final destination, but in the interruption. Interrupting the pattern rewires the brain. Every time you do something different in the face of the same trigger, you build new neural connections. You teach your nervous system that a new outcome is possible. And when you repeat that enough times, the new pattern becomes the default. That's how you go from reactive to responsive, from self-doubt to self-leadership, from chaos to clarity, not by thinking about change, but by physically doing something different the moment the old pattern shows up. This is where awareness becomes your greatest tool. Because most of the time, your patterns don't scream. They whisper. They show up as subtle resistance, as hesitation, as scrolling through your phone when you're supposed to be building your dream, as saying, "I'll do it tomorrow," when you know damn well tomorrow becomes next week, next month, next year. You have to train yourself to notice, to pause, to breathe, to decide, not drift. Because every small moment you interrupt the pattern, you weaken its power. But don't just interrupt the pattern, replace it. The nervous system needs a new target. If you used to shut down when things got stressful, teach your body to breathe deeper and move stronger. If you used to run when things got intimate, teach yourself to stay and speak truthfully. If you used to explode with anger when you felt cornered, train your system to respond with grounded certainty instead of rage. The old pattern was there to protect you. So you don't fight it with shame. You override it with power. The goal is not perfection. The goal is disruption. To break the loop long enough to remind yourself that you are not a prisoner to your past patterns. You are the author, and you've just been writing the same chapter over and over without realizing it. But once you see the pattern, you can reframe the story. You can make a new decision. You can shift from reaction to creation, from unconscious survival to conscious leadership. And make no mistake, this isn't easy, because patterns come with momentum. You've lived them for years, sometimes decades. They've been your armor, your refuge, your excuse. But they are also your limit. And if you want freedom, if you want real change, you've got to become more committed to your vision than you are to your comfort. More loyal to your future than your familiar pain. You've got to interrupt the cycle, not once but again and again, until the old story can no longer recognize you. Most people think they're deciding, but what they're really doing is dabbling. They say things like, "I've made up my mind," or "I'm going to give it a try," or "I hope it works out." That's not a decision, that's a wish. That's a half-hearted commitment with the back door still open. And as long as you leave yourself an exit, you will never fully walk through the entrance to your next level. A true decision is a point of no return. It's not, maybe. It's not, if it's convenient. It's not, I'll see how it feels. It's done. The only thing left is execution. The moment you truly decide, when your soul says enough, when your gut says, it changes now, when your spirit draws a line in the sand and dares life to push back, that's when everything begins to move. The world doesn't respond to your intentions. It responds to your clarity. Clarity of purpose. Clarity of identity. Clarity of decision. Because when you decide with finality, your actions align. Your habits shift. Your relationships recalibrate. You stop negotiating with excuses and start negotiating with results. There's a reason why people stay in limbo. Because limbo feels safe. Indecision gives the illusion of control. You don't have to fail. You don't have to risk. You don't have to face what might happen if you go all in and fall short. But that safety is costing you your life. You're not tired because you're doing too much. You're tired because you're doing too little of what matters and dragging the weight of indecision behind you. Every day you wait to commit is a day you tell your future it's not important enough yet. Look at any moment that changed your life, not gradually, not eventually, but instantly. I promise you it was born from a decision. A moment when you burned the boats. A moment when you didn't ask for permission or consensus. A moment when you stopped hoping and started owning. When you decided that who you were no longer matched where you were going. That kind of decision doesn't come from logic. It comes from a place deeper than the mind. It comes from your truth. The truth that's been buried under layers of fear, self-doubt, and stories that were never even yours to begin with. The problem isn't that you don't know what to do. It's that you haven't decided who you are. Because once you decide who you are, your behavior takes care of itself. Once you decide, I am someone who finishes, quitting is no longer on the menu. Once you decide, I am someone who leads, waiting for validation becomes irrelevant. Once you decide, I am someone who honors my body, my word, my mission, the temptation to break your standards starts to dissolve, not because it's easy, but because it's settled. And when it's settled internally, nothing outside can shake it. But most people are addicted to hesitation. Addicted to the illusion of, someday. They don't want to decide because then they'd have to change. They'd have to let go of the identity that's been keeping them small. They'd have to stop hiding behind potential and step into performance. They'd have to show up fully, and that kind of exposure terrifies them. So they keep gathering information, waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect conditions. But perfection is just a mask for fear. And while they wait, life doesn't pause. Time doesn't wait. Opportunity doesn't knock twice just because you were too distracted to hear it the first time. You want to change your life, decide. Not someday, not when the stars align. Decide now, decide like your life depends on it, because in a very real way it does. The quality of your life is the direct result of the quality of your decisions. Weak decisions lead to weak results. Delayed decisions lead to delayed destiny. But powerful decisions, real decisions, they create momentum, they command focus, they generate energy. You don't need more motivation. You need a moment of absolute resolve. You felt it before, the moment when something clicked, when there was no turning back, when the excuses fell flat, when the pain of staying the same became greater than the fear of change. That's what a decision feels like. It's not just a thought, it's a physical shift. Your chest opens up, your voice gets stronger, your movements get more deliberate. You stop waiting for someone else to go first. You become the initiator. Because once the decision is made, your nervous system starts to rewire around it. Your behavior adapts. Your standards rise. Your environment either supports it or gets left behind. And let's be real, there's a cost to every decision. But there's also a cost to indecision, a greater one. The cost of regret, the cost of potential unexpressed, the cost of watching other people live out the life you knew deep down was possible for you too. Every time you delay a decision, you are training yourself to doubt. Every time you decide and follow through, you are training yourself to trust. And the person who trusts themselves becomes unstoppable, not because they never fall, but because they don't hesitate to rise. Deciding doesn't mean you know every step. It means you've closed the door on retreat. It means you've said, this is who I am now and I will build everything around that truth. It means that even when it's hard, even when it's uncertain, even when fear creeps in, you don't renegotiate. You adjust the strategy, not the decision. You pivot the method, not the mission. Because the decision is no longer up for debate. It's who you are now. It's woven into your identity. It's written into your nervous system. And from that moment on, everything begins to align around it. You don't need another motivational quote. You don't need another plan. What you need is to take full command of the one thing you've always had, but maybe never fully owned. Your story. Because the story you tell yourself is the one your life becomes. Change your story and you change what's possible. Change your story and you break through the patterns. Change your story and you reclaim your identity. Not the one that was handed to you. The one you were born to embody. It's not about hoping anymore. It's about choosing. Choosing to live from truth instead of fear. Choosing to lead instead of follow. Choosing to interrupt the cycle and stand for something greater. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not your limitations. You are the author of what happens next. But authors don't wait for permission. They don't hope the ending writes itself. They grab the pen and they decide. So right here, right now, no more waiting. No more negotiating with mediocrity. Decide who you are. Own that identity. Cut off from the old story like your life depends on it. Because it does. That's when life meets you with momentum. That's when doors open. That's when the world begins to respond to the power of your decision. Not because things got easier, but because you got clear, unshakably clear. And from that clarity, everything changes. This is your moment. Not someday. Not when the conditions are perfect. Right now. Take back the pen. Change your story. Change your life.